You're listening to the Regeneration Rising podcast, a podcast from the Quivira Coalition about the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of agrarians in the United States. Each episode will explore what it means to work in regenerative agriculture, how people came to choose this as their livelihood, and why it's important to them and the future. We hope to build a foundation for a strong community of future agrarians and land stewards with a regenerative approach to community, relationships, and the land.
Hello and welcome back to Regeneration Rising. I'm Taylor Mulia, and we're recording here in mid-October 2023. It's gearing up to be quite a busy fall season here at the Quivira Coalition. Before we get started with our interview, I wanted to just highlight that the Regenerate Conference is coming up in a few weeks. If you haven't purchased your ticket already, please join us on November 1st through 3rd in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The Regenerate Conference brings together the American Grass-Fed Association, Quivira Coalition, and Holistic Management International. And we really gather folks from all over the United States to talk about microbial soil communities, to social relationships and markets, to our changing climate and everything in between. And we also have a special beginning farmer and rancher career connections opportunity and job fair on November 2nd in the evening, as well as a social co-hosted by the National Young Farmers Coalition. So that should be a really special aspect of the conference, and we hope to see you there. So on to today's episode. I'm interviewing for the first time a new Agrarian Program mentor as a solo guest on the podcast, but she's actually also a beginning rancher herself. My guest is Layna Jansen. She is the beef program coordinator at the home ranch in Clark, Colorado. I spent about a half day working with Layna this last summer, and I loved working with her. I really appreciated, she just has this can-do attitude and an incredible knowledge of horsemanship. So I thought she'd be a great guest. She and her boss, Michael Moon, will be hiring an apprentice for the 2024 season. And so if you are interested and you like what you hear, feel free to apply. Our applications for next season open November 1st and close December 15th. And you can find that information at quiviracoalition.org/newagrarian. And speaking of applications opening soon, we have a few online events that will help you in preparation for applying for the program. If you haven't caught one of our NAP 101 calls, we have one more after the release of this episode. There's one on October 16th, but if you missed that, it's A-okay. We will have the recording on our website. We also have another one on November 14th at 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time. And that is a great opportunity for you to learn about all the sites in our program and to learn more about sort of the nuts and bolts and details of what the program entails. And additionally, we will be hosting a tips and tricks for applying webinar. Myself and my coworker, Lucas Sampson, up in the Northern Plains, will be hosting a webinar outlining best practices for applying to the program, how to create an application that is very desirable, and how to land the apprenticeship at the sites that you're hoping to work for. So we'll hope you join us for that. It's on November 9th, 6 to 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time, and that is virtual. And you can find information for all these events at quiviracoalition.org/events. Okay, well, thanks for joining us today. On to our interview. Here's Layna Jansen. I hope you enjoy. Well, Layna, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Yes, happy to be here.
So can you tell us first, where are you calling in from?
I am calling from Clark, Colorado, which is in Northwest Colorado, about 30 minutes outside of Steamboat Springs.
Awesome. And you guys are getting is this your first snow tonight?
First snow of the fall tonight. Yes.
Nice. It's so crazy. The growing season up there is so different, but it's exciting. I'm kind of jealous that you get to kind of hopefully rest a little bit once the snow comes in.
It does allow it to slow down. Different work.
So you're a mentor in our program. We've known each other for a little while now, but I'd love to just for the listeners get a little bit more of your background. So can you tell us a little bit about sort of where you grew up. And I always like to hear, what were you like as a kid?
I grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia. Definitely like true suburban neighborhood, but there was a horse barn at the entrance to our neighborhood. And as a kid, I just begged my parents to let me start taking lessons, and eventually got to start riding and then working at that boarding barn. And that was just where I spent all my time as a kid through high school. I just loved to work outside, like, haul the horses hay and water, and ride anytime outside of school that I could.
Oh, and did you have any family members that were into agriculture or horses at all? Or is it just kind of out of nowhere?
Out of nowhere. I was just obsessed. My parents were and are professors, and so they were totally uninvolved. And they would come around to the barn and like hold my horse for a minute, but it was totally just out of the blue that I wanted to do it so much.
What were you like in high school? Were you interested in any other like extracurriculars? Or was it pretty much just horses?
I ran cross country and track. I love just like moving my body and being outside. And I think that's why a lot of the barn work, honestly, maybe even more than the horse, like truly just working with the horses, was why I got so much inspiration out of it. I just loved like getting through the workday, carrying at the time it's not like I was huge, and I would just love carrying the 5-gallon buckets down the barn aisleway. And as a kid, I was just like obsessed with like making the work more efficient. I'd be like, oh, chores took me 3 hours this morning. Like, could I do it in 2 hours and 40 minutes tomorrow? And just like making the barn, like, I just loved to like keep a tidy space. And the barn community was pretty cool, I guess, as well. They had a ton of lessons and a ton of boarders. And so it was also just an awesome community to spend my time with. So I was there, after school all the time, hang out with my friends. We'd ride, we'd look after the horses, and then head on home at the end of the day.
So if I understand correctly, you moved to Colorado when you were pretty young. So was that right out of high school?
Well, I graduated high school and took a job at the home ranch where I'm currently at, which at the time was a high-end guest ranch. And so I was hired on as a wrangler, which meant looking after the horse herd and mostly leading trail rides. And so I did that right when I was 18 and was just out here originally for the summer before I went back to university in Charlottesville. And I was ruined though. After that first summer in Colorado, back at school, like all I could think about was getting back out here. Cause I mean, I'd always been an outdoorsy kid, but I'd never really like hiked and camped and like truly been in the mountains. And I just fell in love with it out here in Clark.
Yeah. So did you end up finishing university, or did you kind of ditch early because you loved it out here?
I finished university. I would just come out here in summers in between, and went to school for anthropology and food sustainability. And while I was out at school, I'd always sort of cared about good food and like how did we feed ourselves in a way that wasn't detrimental to the land. And so while I was in school, it started to really raise the question of like, okay, what would good meat, like what goes into all that? And like, do I believe it can happen? At that point when I was in college, I'd been a vegetarian for close to 15 years.
Wow.
And so I never really believed in beef, but as just like my little bit of exposure working out at the home ranch, yes, it was a horse job, but we had a small resident cow herd that we'd move them around, and the guests would be able to sort them and work on them. And so it started to really raise the question of like, okay, how do I believe that beef is bad, which is what I'd been like truly just learning in school and been exposed to for years in Virginia.
Yeah, I know. I feel like that conversation's really not, I had the same experience at university. It was very much like a very settled debate. Like if you're a environmentalist, you're a vegetarian. And so it also blew my mind. I was like, what? I totally wrote this off. Like I didn't even give it a chance.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why like once I finished school and I was back out at the home ranch working after I graduated, I started to really question how much I felt like I could stand behind that. I was like, I want to do my own research about what I've just been like reading papers about and hearing lectured to me. And like, I want to see if I can stand behind this argument of let's limit our meat consumption.
Yeah.
And at that time, right after graduation, the home ranch actually closed its doors as a guest ranch and was reopening as a cattle operation. And so I ended up taking an apprenticeship at a place in California that was kind of like on the forefront of regenerative ranching, and just sort of dove headfirst into seeing how that played out and like seeing if I could stand behind it, and what I thought about like all that went into having cows on the land, and if we could do some good with it.
Yeah. So it sounds like the home ranch changed a lot over the years. And then you also, like, your role at it changed a lot. So, you're mostly doing rides for guests and stuff like that at the beginning. And what does your job look like now?
So now we still have a pretty decent sized horse herd. So my job is partly looking after them. Partly it's all the thing that goes into moving the cows, cow working days, pasture management, electric fencing, and all that. And then partly the beef program, which Home Ranch started marketing its own beef a couple of years ago. So just organizing processor dates and finishing cows and all that. So it's a pretty varied job now compared to what I originally came out to this property to do. And I love the variety. It's like allowed me to really, like, those are really my three main interests in ranching, and I get to do them all. And I definitely feel pretty lucky that my job descriptions.
So Michael Moon is your supervisor, and he's actually been a friend of Quivira for a long time, and he's been in the Colorado ranching community for a long time. Can you talk about sort of your relationship? It sounds like he's sort of been a mentor for you and has just kind of shaped a lot of what the home ranch does. So yeah, can you talk about your relationship?
Yeah, I worked for Michael back when it was a guest ranch, and then he has stayed on now that it's a cattle operation. So he's just known me for a lot of years here, which there's just like something special about that. And I've learned so much from him as a mentor, because he truly, better than like anyone I've ever met, can think so holistically about how an operation is run. And while something might seem like a really obvious solution to me, I'll be chatting about it with him and he'll be like, well, did you think about that repercussion or what that might mean in 2 months from now? Which it's just like an impressive skill that he has to really slow down and think something through. Yeah, just truly so holistically. And he's got an impressive way about like having faith you will get something done, and but also like really giving you the space to mess up, because you're going to be the one to fix it. And I just think like that's given me like a lot of like confidence in myself of like, okay, even if I don't know how to do it, he knows I'll like use the resources around me or him or whoever to figure it out. And it truly has given me a lot of confidence.
Do you feel like that was something that was sort of natural to him? I think one aspect of mentorship that I find really fascinating is like passing the threshold through sort of like just having somebody like giving directions, and then getting to the point where you're sort of passing more into like, I'm going to challenge them. Like I'm going to sort of ask how they would do it and maybe let them see if that worked, and we'll all see the consequences. And that's when the real learning happens. So did you feel like you felt that switch, or kind of was it always like that?
Yeah, I think it's also that he sort of upped what was expected of me as I gained skills in like a pretty natural way, which I also think is like an impressive ability of a mentor. But I think it was, yeah, maybe exactly what you're saying. He's good about saying, here's your final goal of like what needs to happen, and then gives you the space to get there, rather than what's like, I think a little more typical is people try to like lay out every step that needs to happen and give you no room to solve it yourself.
So I also want to talk about too, I mean, you've been at the home ranch, sounds like on and off for close to a decade, which is just really rare for people you're still in your 20s. So like how many people can say that they've been affiliated with one job for almost a decade. So yeah, like what's it been like to stay at a place for so long?
Yeah, I truly just love this plot of land and I love Clark so much. And I just think to me, like the community that I establish in a place is like crucial to like how I can give it so much time. And I think it takes at least 5 years to really get like the community that I think most of us strive for. I mean, I of course like know you can make friends and good coworkers in a much shorter span of time, but I think to truly like have that diverse and broad community you want, I really do think it just takes a lot of dedication to a place. And it's just, it's the same reason I worked at that boarding barn for, tons of years growing up. I just think I really appreciate like getting to know a place inside and out and really like round out the people I know. And I just think there's a lot of value in like knowing the land and know when the rain comes, that spring's going to be doing really good for a few extra days. And I just think that takes so much time to really get there.
Yeah.
And I think like maybe you miss out on like the thrill of newness, but I think to me, the contentment and enjoyment I get out of knowing a place and a community is worth that trade-off.
That's huge. I feel like we've talked about this in person before. Like a lot of our apprentices sort of hop from place to place, and there's so many opportunities, and you can do so much travel and go to see who you want to be, like where you want to be. I think that's so enticing to a lot of young people. But yeah, I mean, what keeps you there? Like, I mean, you said like the landscape, but I mean, when it got hard, like, did you have a point where you were like, man, it is hard to make community here? Like, did you ever have those stumbling blocks?
For sure. I think part of the reason I have been able to commit to this place for close to a decade on and off is that I did take that time to kind of travel around. I did like work away writing jobs abroad and, some other stuff. So I think this place was always in the back of my head of like, oh, but that's where I want to be home at. And so I do think on some level, like maybe you do need to bounce around to figure that out. And maybe I was just lucky that I found this place really early on that I knew was always going to be the base I was going to return to. But I think, yeah, there was definitely spans when the community would come and go. I had some awesome coworkers that would be here for a little bit and then they would move on. And sometimes that part for sure is hard, but that's why I think you just broaden your community outwards. Like I have a buddy who I took on his first horseback ride 8 years ago, and now he is leasing land and running his own cattle and beef program down the street. And I just think you kind of just like you power through and you like meet those people that like really matter. And then maybe it's the Clark store worker that's now known you for so many years. And I just think you put in the time and those little connections of the people you've known for so many years pay off even when maybe some of like the deeper best friendships come and go.
I kind of feel like that about Quebec too. I've been here for about 2.5 years and I've sort of bounced around so much before then. And all of a sudden I'm coming to the conference and it's like all of a sudden it hits you. You're like, man, I mean, 2.5, that's not very long, but you see things happen where you're like, oh my gosh, you used to be an apprentice, or like, oh, I saw you go through this incredible transformation. And there's sort of this like deep gratification of like of knowing people for a longer period and just seeing that story evolve. I understand. Even if it's like the person that works at the grocery store. Yeah. And you just have seen them for many years.
Yeah, exactly. Like seeing the faces of everyone. It is. Yeah, exactly that. Just super gratifying. And I do think maybe it was just lucky, like I said, because outside of just my home ranch coworkers, I do have like a pretty incredible town friend crew that weirdly everyone met working back here when it was seasonal jobs and they decided to move to Steamboat to stick around. And so again, we even joke about it to this day, 10 years later, that like, why did we all stick around? Like not all those people are in ranching, but we all decided to like prioritize being here. And we're like, was it the home ranch? Was it just this town? But yeah, I do think yeah, there's power to just sticking around, or like prioritizing sticking around your people.
And yeah, tell us more about what it's like to live up there. I don't think a lot of people get to live in such a stunning place. But it also comes with, you know, you guys are really high elevation, you're mountainous, you're also a really tourist town. You know, you're close to a really tourist economy, which can be challenging in some ways and then awesome in other ways. So yeah, tell us about where you live. Like, what are the people like? What's it like living there?
Clark itself's a very small little ranching town. So I do feel super lucky that I live up here. And so I can give some distance away from the hustle and bustle of Steamboat if I don't want to partake in going to town. But I actually love the Steamboat community. It's a pretty young crowd of really just people who love to play outside. And like in high water season, everyone I've ever met in town is out on their rafts taking laps through town, or obviously ski season, everyone's on the mountain. So I love that everyone here just like really loves to play outside. And I sort of inserted myself into the Steamboat community. I picked up on my day off from the ranch. I work at a cute local brewery in town, and that's just like my way to get out to town and like really feel like I have a little bit of a place. I once had someone say, you have a spot, which is home, a B spot, which is your workplace, and like, what's your C spot? And that brewery has sort of become that. It's like that third little place that I feel like I have a community in.
Yeah. And it's such a different work than what you're doing on the ranch that it's like it's like fun because you're like, oh, I love going around and like making this place beautiful and like making everything clean again and making people happy. And yeah, so I totally get that. It's kind of a different side of your brain that you're using.
Yeah, exactly that.
Nice. So yeah, let's go back to your position at the home ranch. You know, you're balancing a lot. And you said that one of the best aspects of your job is the fact that it is multidimensional. But what's another sort of highlight? Like, what's your favorite part about your job?
I mean, I think if I like truly simplified it down to like what is like when I'm going through a season, like what are the moments that feel like where I feel the most gratitude, it's probably the 6 a.m. mornings with the coworkers when we're all saddling up our horses and drinking coffee and about to go move cows. Like that feeling to me is why I do it. And again, it's like partly the coworker crew, it's partly being outside in a beautiful place at sunrise, and it's partly that I'm sitting on a horse when I do it. But those moments are like what truly like give me the inspiration of why I do it.
Yeah.
But I truly love trying to like get better at my stockmanship and work cows. Like to me, corral sorting days and anything where we're like doing something technical with the cows, I love it. Like really fuels me. And when, especially because of the horsemanship aspect too, like when you get to have a horse that's like really on board with you and like trying to do the job and help you out, that to me is like such an incredible feeling. And going back to like knowing the property, a lot of what I do is planning the pasture moves and like tracking how it looks before and after and just forage assessment stuff. And so I do love being like, okay, like I know I hit that pasture a little bit hard, like the cycle before. So I kind of want to change it up and graze that a little later in the season or something like that. So like that sort of structure and care for the land and like seeing a meadow look really good, like that also just brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah. On the flip side, what would you say is the most challenging thing that you have to balance?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is definitely just winter up here.
Yeah.
We keep the horses here and then a certain amount of the cows hang out here for the winter. And so simply just keeping gates shoveled out and troughs exposed when it's snowing for 20 days straight is for sure like a challenge when you wake up and you're freezing the entire day.
Yeah, we had a rough, I was talking to you this year because Colorado had a rough winter this year. And so I think you were pretty tired this spring. You're like pretty ready for that green grass by the time that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. This winter more than most for sure.
You know, you're a mentor in our program. You are the youngest mentor, I think, which is really cool. I think It's pretty remarkable though, because you've been at a place for longer than a lot of people have been at their jobs, much older than you. So, you kind of got your feet under you this first year with your first apprentice. What's your favorite part about being a mentor in the NAP program?
I really just loved watching our apprentice like come in with like a certain level of horse and riding experience, and just with like what didn't even feel like maybe that much training or teaching. Now the apprentice is like riding through the forest by themselves all day, like hopping over downfall and searching for cows. And I just think there's something really cool about it's just taught me a lot that, okay, if you just take like a little bit of time to show and teach, yes, there's like plenty of nuance, like getting really skilled at that. But like for the most part, people can then go do it. And that's really cool. I think sometimes it feels sort of daunting and like it's a little too much to learn or too much to pass off. And I think with the apprentice this year, I've really been like, okay, no, I think if you just plan to show them, for the most part, people can go get something done pretty quick. And that's been really cool. And just we have like a barn to look after. And so the apprentice and I will sometimes alternate days off and having them look after the barn when I'm away. And just like, I don't have to worry for a second that things are going to be sorted because they've just been exposed to it. They've done it and you can trust them to get it done is like, it's a pretty cool feeling too.
And is there anything that has been surprising to you as you've gone through your first year of mentorship?
Thinking about how much of your day when you're communicating it to someone else is sort of bustly. I think in my head, it seems sort of obvious, like, oh, I'll go from point A here to point B. And these are the 8 things we need to get done today. And then when you are starting the day and communicating that to someone, you're like, okay, there's a bit all over the place. So working on like, okay, one, how to dial that in, or like how to communicate in a way that's not as confusing to the apprentice or your coworker, whoever it is that you're sharing the day with. Because I think when it's just yourself, it's sort of, you just bounce around through your list. But when you're dragging someone else into it, I think I definitely need to work on like being a little bit more streamlined in how I communicate it or how we delegate the tasks.
Yeah, totally. Because I think it all makes sense in your mind because you're seeing the big picture and all the moving pieces. But you've got someone who just showed up and they're like, I don't even know anybody's name. Like,
yeah, exactly that.
I would love to know, like, now that you've sort of been on both sides of, well, you're obviously going to be learning for a long time, but you've been sort of the apprentice side and now you're the mentor side. What's one piece of advice that you would share with an apprentice or a beginning agrarian?
The one piece of advice I would say is figure out like what it is within ranching, which is like what truly is going to drive you or like what you're passionate about. I think it's like often easy to be like, oh, well, I just want to like see and do it all. And it's like, I think there's a lot of operations out there that do things way differently or have different priorities, and like figure out what it is about it that you actually care about. Like, is it the grass rotation side of things? Is it the cowboying side of things? And try to find a spot that meets that rather than just being like walking into any ranching operation. And I think also think about like your skill set as a worker or a coworker. Like if you're someone who wants a bigger team, like at the home ranch, there are places where that does exist. And that's something that really has drawn me to staying here. It's like, I like that, having a whole big coworker crew, while there's some places that it's going to be you and one other guy. So I think about that and like, don't feel like you need to just fit in like what the box of like a rancher is. I think you can design it a little bit more than we sometimes give it credit for. And I think also like what are good skill sets you bring to the table, like try to advocate for yourself in that job position. Like if you're someone who you feel like you're really observant, like advocate to be the one to go do the herd checks and like look for animal health issues. Or if you're the one who's like good on a computer and keeping track of numbers, like even as a beginning agrarian, be like, I'm going to be the one to keep track of numbers. And like, do you mind if I like write down all our grazing dates and like the boss can turn to you when he needs to remember what day you moved out of the pasture. I think we can like bring a lot more value and like fill in the gaps in a job, even when you're starting out, more than we think, rather than just like sitting back and letting the job be taught to you.
That's such a good piece of advice, because there are so many things that are not rocket science, but they are contained. Like, I'll write the numbers down for you and put them into the system, or like I'll take care of, like this one particular thing. It also creates this like, it creates this sense of like, oh, that person is really good at that thing. And they're like actually a really valued member of the team now because they did a really good job at that. And we don't even have to think about that anymore.
Right, exactly. Like you don't necessarily need to, especially starting out, be like the best all arounder. Like I do think like we can each, even when you're like at an entry level of a job, like bring in like on some level, I think then the job title sort of gets assigned to you of like what value you bring. And so yeah, I think that would be my biggest piece of advice.
That's great. Yeah, that actually spurred a couple more questions that I now have. You were saying like you like being in a larger team. What are some of the lessons that you've learned in being a good coworker, like being a good teammate?
I really enjoy like having like my coworkers like be like even Michael, even my boss, I guess. Like I think there's like something really fun about just like being able to sort of like banter with your coworkers and like make the job fun and not always take it so seriously. And so I think even when things like, yes, there's going to be moments that like it would be quite a bummer if things got messed up on that level, like, don't let things slip through the cracks. But I do think like there's something you can really like keep the group dynamic positive if you can just kind of be the one to keep it lighthearted, to keep everybody communicating, to not let like things get too serious or ego get in the way. I think that's when like things make a downfall or the job starts to feel not that pleasant or the cow move's getting frustrating. But if you guys can just sometimes like shoulder shrug and smile at each other when the job's getting a little bit messy, I think at the end of the day, like it doesn't matter if it took an extra hour, like at least you guys were like feeling like a team about it and not resenting each other.
You like came out of it intact.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think this is maybe a silly one, but I really think like sharing like a coffee moment together with your coworkers, like at a team meeting you guys are having, or like before you got, like I was saying, like before you're saddling up the horses in the morning, I think like something about just like sharing that moment, like really keeps the energy of the day better. It just like really makes it that you guys are like all doing it together rather than like showing up late and scrambling.
Or I've had like before where someone like even a supervisor too, comes out and it's like checking on you, but didn't make the time in the morning to like even ask how you were doing. They just kind of showed up midday and was like, is the job done yet? It's like, oh, even if you have the best of intentions, like that dynamic sucks so bad. And so, but like if that same person had in the morning, just like checked in with you and just been like, it's fine if we take 20 minutes to just chill out and have coffee and, kick the tires and just, catch up. That's huge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And lastly, I'd say just coworker things. I think just planning. Like, I think if you are organized in your agenda and you take the extra time, like I said, we're a bigger operation. So sometimes that's a lot of phone calls throughout a week. But if you can take that time to like really communicate like the dates you have in your head or the tasks that need to happen, it just like allows the whole team to run more efficiently and not feel like, oh, well, if I had known that, you needed to move the cows that day, maybe I would have switched this task around. So I think really taking the time for you to calendar plan and then to communicate that clearly to everyone else who might be involved. Maybe they actually aren't that involved, but even just knowing it's going on, that to me is like a huge, really just like a respect thing to your coworkers.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge. Yeah. And another question that I had too is like, you grew up in the horse world, and we have a lot of apprentices that didn't, and they're sort of finding that it is a really valuable job skill for ranching. And maybe they're not, maybe they are super passionate about it, but maybe they're not. And they just are curious about how to learn more and how to like, just like be better with horsemanship. Like, how would you recommend them going about that?
I mean, I don't want to say like me growing up, like I did plenty of lessons and like had formal training when I was a kid, which definitely was super valuable. But really, I think like in the ranching world now and like what the horse skills needed in my day to day, I really just think it's hours in the saddle, which I think for some people is like a hard thing to hear because it's like, oh, well, but I want to be cowboying yesterday.
Yeah.
But I think the more you can get on a horse, the better. So like I said, I obviously didn't want to always pay for lessons. It is an expensive thing to get into. So I work awayed abroad a lot and just led trail rides, or like you can work at barns, even, you know, like around where you're living. Like if you can volunteer at a barn, and it takes a lot of the background work to be able to sit on the horse. And I think that's okay. And if people aren't willing to do that, you probably shouldn't be riding. So like maybe it means you help clean stalls to be able to hack someone's horse for an hour a day. But I just think the more you can get on the back of a horse, the better. And within that, like to actually be involved with the cow side of things, like work on your stockmanship on the ground, or like there's really awesome horse training videos about working cows. And I think don't be scared to like do a lot of the research on your own at home, reading a book in the evening. Like I think you can learn a lot that way if it's horse skills or if it's pasture management or anything like that. Like it doesn't always have to be boots on the ground experience. If you can do a little bit of reading and watching videos, use that time.
I guess we'll finish up here by saying that you are one of the mentors that are hiring for the 2024 season. So our applications open November 1st. And I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to say a little bit more about like what kind of apprentice are you looking for this year? What are the skill sets that they might need? Maybe what is a personality type that might fit well at the home ranch?
Yeah, we're super excited to have an apprentice again. Like I've sort of said, we do pretty much all our cow work on horses, but you by no means have to know how to ride. It does help, but we have a ton of fencing to do. So like, I don't want to sell it that there's not going to be a lot of that sort of, you're going to plug in a podcast or music and be out there on the fence for days at a time. But yeah, we're just excited to have someone who likes you have to want to like a bit of a bigger scene. We have like some construction going on at the ranch for some renovations and things like that. So we're not necessarily like peaceful. You're going to see one other person in your day. Like you have to be sort of motivated by like the energy of a ton going on. But we have like a pretty awesome forest permit that we ride on and a property out on the Utah border. Couple-hour drive away. That's sort of more of our commercial cow working operation that we go out and help out at. So yeah, there's definitely like some true, you need a little bit more like gumption riding, ranching stuff to do, but we also have like that kind of busier headquarters with a whole crew out and about. So it's a balance for sure. But if that sounds exciting to you, then look into our operation.
Yeah, sounds good. And if folks are interested, you can find our information at quiviracoalition.org. There's a locations page and there's all the participating mentor sites. So I just wanted to say, Layna, thank you so much for being a mentor in our program. We value just the time that you take and taking beginning agrarians and teaching them and the patience. So I want to thank you for that, but also thanks for just coming on today and sharing your story. It was really, really interesting and so enlightening. I love any little bits of lessons I get to take from you. So thanks for sharing today.
Thanks for having me.
If you'd like to find more information about the Home Ranch, you can see their site description on our program's website. And additionally, you can find their website is thehomeranch.com. And you can also find them on social media. Their handle is @thehomeranch. And don't forget, we share educational opportunities and job postings in our newsletter. So if you're not already subscribed, you can go to our main webpage, quiviracoalition.org. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll find Get E-News. Enter your info there and get signed up. It is a fantastic newsletter, a great way to stay connected to our program and our community. And if you like our show, please consider leaving a rating and a review. and subscribe to our show. It really does help others find this podcast, and it might even help folks find a career in agriculture, which is pretty cool. So thanks to all of you for doing that, and we hope to see you soon at the Regenerate Conference in Santa Fe.
Thank you for listening to Regeneration Rising, a podcast production of the Quivira Coalition. Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and other popular podcast platforms. Become a Patreon supporter by visiting quiviracoalition.org/podcasts. We'd like to thank Quivira staff for their contributions to this podcast. This episode was edited and engineered by Caleb Wenzel-Fisher. Wanderlust, our theme music, was made by Scott Buckley. And we're grateful for our guests taking the time to talk with us about their experiences. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the land.